must begin by thanking you for being here, because without you, I wouldn't be able to be here. We do come to Iona, we do celebrate, but it's a different feeling when it's just the community. In some ways, it's better when it's just the nuns and the monks, and in other ways, there's an element missing somehow. And I'm very happy that in the summers we can bring people in. And have you seen people come in during the service and they wonder what's going on, and sometimes they stay and they receive holy bread, and sometimes they stay and they have questions. Saint Oran is one of the saints I love most. He and Saint Brandon are probably among the Celtic saints, the saints that I feel most closely connected with. And with Saint Oran, it wasn't really my choice. It really was his choice. He, for some reason, liked me before I grew to love him. I remember the first time I came to Iona, that I had all these great expectations about meeting the great saint, meeting Saint Columba, and feeling every single sort of feeling that a monk wants to feel when he goes to a sacred place. And I remember arriving to the island and making my way to the abbey and just feeling cold and empty and almost unwelcome to some degree. And I'm sure part of it is just the setup, the new setup of the abbey. But I'm sure also spiritually that part of it was that I hadn't yet come here to St. Oran. When I was going back, really sad, and saddened by that experience, back to the ferry, I noticed St. Oran. I didn't know it existed. So I thought, okay, let's see what that building is as well. And I came and I read about St. Oran and the fact that this is the only building on the island that goes back to the first millennium. And I came in expecting nothing. And I received everything. I felt so welcome and I felt so loved and wanted, as if St. Oran and these walls had been expecting me, had been waiting for me, and everything I wanted to feel in the abbey from St. Columba, I was given from St. Oran. Later on, reading the life of St. Columba by St. Iona, I've learned that even in his lifetime, St. Columba never received anyone until they went and they prayed at the grave of St. Oran. And in many ways, I look at it as a lesson beyond the grave, where St. Columba did the same thing. He said, no monk, you wait a little, there's someone else who has to welcome you before I have the right to do so. And if you've noticed, even in our monastery in the evening when we say our prayers to the Celtic saints, we remember St. Oran before we remember St. Columba. And there's a reason for that. There is a story concerning St. Oran's life that after they landed on Iona, the monks kept trying to build their first Christian temple, their first Christian church. And everything they built during the day collapsed the night after that day. And that happened again and again, until eventually St. Columba, in a vision, was told by one of the local demons. I mean, people here were pagan at the time. And Iona was known as the Holy Island before the arrival of Christians, because it was inhabited by pagan hermits. One of these local gods came to St. Columba in a vision and told him that nothing on Iona can be built, nothing can be founded without human sacrifice, because human sacrifice was part of the ritual of the pagan world. And indeed, if you look, I'll point it out to you, just in front of the abbey, there's a hill called Dan E. And on top of that hill, human sacrifices were performed. There are also on Mars at least 4 or 5 places where there are circles of standing stones where we know that human sacrifices were performed as part of the ritual of the time. Now, how do you do that as a Christian? How do you find somebody and kill him or her in order to build a church? St. Columba spoke with his companions. There were 13 of them in total, St. Columba and 12 companions. And they decided that the only solution is for them to leave Iona and find another island where to establish a community. But St. Oran, who was the oldest among them, the wisest, and probably the most advanced in terms of spiritual life, he offered to be buried alive as the human sacrifice upon which this first Christian church should be built. I'm not going to go into any details because they have not been kept, and for a very good reason. Ultimately, we know that that thing happened. We know that Saint Oran was buried down there under the altar we celebrated upon. This is not obviously the original altar because this building itself goes back to the 900s, maybe even a bit later. But that is the place where Saint Oran was built, and that is where the first altar, Christian altar, was located on this island. And because of Saint Oran, everything became possible. The great history of Iona, the great Christian Celtic crosses that we know, wonderful things like the Book of Kells and other manuscripts could be created. But ultimately what he did is that he offered his life as a sacrifice so that his companions, his monastic brethren, could have a place where they can celebrate, where they can receive the body and the blood of Christ, so they find their salvation. He gave his life for the life of his brothers. And we know from Christ's mouth that there is no greater love than to put down your life for the life of your brother. It's one of those stories that for me personally, I don't dwell on it, I don't try to make sense of it, I don't try to understand it, I look at it the way you look at a miracle. Something that is entirely out of the reach of my own faith, something entirely beyond the limitations of my own faith. And I look at it and I'm reminded how small, how limited, how humble I must be if something like that feels so alien to me. And this saint, who had so much love to die for his brethren, this same saint received me with love that I've only felt later on, maybe from Saint Brandon, among the Celtic saints. I'll only say one more thing and then we go. And I'll say it because I noticed John's filming, and I want this to be heard by as many people as possible. It is striking the difference between the faith of someone like Saint Oran, who would give his life so that his brethren would be saved, and the faith that we have today. It is striking the difference between the faith of these saints who traveled from a foreign land into a land of pagans and risked their lives and risked their salvation in order to save these pagans. And the faith that we have today, when we believe that Christianity in some way is this household sort of religion. We live in a world where Christianity, particularly in the West and particularly in America, has become synonymous almost with misogyny and xenophobia and homophobia and every sort of phobia in the world, except the one thing that it should be synonymous with, and that is hope that every single human soul that was ever created by God will be saved. That is the essence of our Christian faith. And if anyone thinks that you are a Christian and you can be a Christian by building a wall around your country, as you tend to do in America today, and as we do in the UK as well, by separating ourselves from the rest of the world, or if we think that we can be called Christians and build walls around our faith and those of different faiths, or around our families and everyone else, then we are more deluded than Judah himself. Because the definition of a Christian from the very beginning has been a heart open in love to the point of dying, willingly, joyfully dying for the salvation of foreigners, of those who come from strange foreign worlds, for those who do not belong to our families or tribes or nations. It's pathetic and it's painful and it's horrifying to me that Christianity today has become what it has become. and that with very few exceptions, the world fears Christians instead of approaching us in hope. We should be the last hope of those who have lost all hope. Instead, we have defined ourselves by opposing everyone else. We have defined ourselves by rejecting everyone else. We have, in some ways, become the judges of the world, when the judge is just Christ and no one else. We have become those who crucify the world, instead of being the ones who are crucified for the world. Don't forget that our model, our, if you want, ideal is Christ. There's nothing we can hope for, nothing we can pray for, more than becoming Christ-like. And how does Christ end up? He ends up on a cross, being crucified. And why is he on that cross? Naked and abandoned and cursed by the very law that he gave us. He's on that cross for the salvation of those people who are crucifying him. How come that we, followers of such a Christ, instead of being crucified with him, have become the ones who crucify the world? How come that us, followers of this person who died for the life and salvation of the world, as we say during every single divine liturgy, have ended up closing ourselves in, becoming this ghetto, this spiritual ghetto that only cares for itself and its members? We should die for the life and the salvation of the world. We shouldn't build walls and think of our comfort and think of our comfortable homes as Europe has done, and Britain in particular, to the eternal shame of this nation has done in 2016, 2015, when all those millions of people struggling to get out of countries that were consumed by wars generated by the West, not by them, were dying, drowning in the Mediterranean Sea, and we did not accept them. We did not accept them. Because what if they come and they change the way they live, the way we live? What if they come and they change our culture? Who cares about culture? Who cares about comfort when you're speaking about the life of a human being? Does it matter that that human being is not Christian? Does it matter that that human being could, let's put the worst case scenario, does it matter that that human being could potentially kill you? Well, that would never happen. But let's assume, if you are a Christian, you would welcome that human being, knowing very well that by welcoming him or her, you have gained your salvation. And instead of that, in America, you're building walls and you're putting children in cages. And in Europe, we have drowned children and their parents being washed on our shores because we don't want to receive them. That's not Christianity, and that's not a follower of Christ. That's us doing precisely what Christ is telling us not to do, corrupting his teaching and following teachers that are not Christians but wolves in disguise. A Christian is a Christian when he or she is crucified for the salvation of the world, not when he is comfortable in his home and he crucifies everyone else who endangers the comfort of his home. I pray St. Orans will one day teach us something of that love that would allow us to put down our lives for the salvation of our neighbor. Because sooner or later, whether we want it or not, whether it will be when we are in our 40s or in our 80s or in our 90s, sooner or later, the only thing that will travel with us through that dark night of our death will be our faith and the love we have invested into this world, into our neighbor. Saint Silouan and so many saints before him, all the way down to Christ, make it so simple. Our neighbor is our salvation. If we lost our neighbor, we lost our salvation. If we gained the salvation of our neighbor, even if we lost our lives doing it, we have gained our salvation. Thank you for being here today. May God bless you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for praying for us. We would not exist without your support. Thank you. Come, sister.